I want you to think about how you were raised, starting from the very earliest days you can possibly remember.
Oh, wow. Going right into the deep end today.
Yeah, we are, because I really want you to think about the specific messaging you received back then. We are taught, I mean, almost from the moment we can walk and talk, to compromise.
Mm-hmm. You are constantly told to just be realistic.
Exactly. You sit in a classroom and you are instructed to listen to feedback, to play well with others, to lower your voice, and basically to smooth off your rough edges.
Right. And to never, ever demand too much from the world around you.
Yes, and on the surface, well, that sounds entirely reasonable. It sounds like the exact recipe you need for a polite, functioning society.
It does. It really does sound like good advice.
But there is a dark side to that conditioning. That perfectly reasonable advice often mutates over time. It becomes this deeply ingrained, socially acceptable excuse to simply give up the moment you are faced with serious friction.
Oh, absolutely.
Well, welcome to the deep dive. Today, we are diving into episode 6 in our series on the book, The Obstacle is the Way. And our mission today is to entirely dismantle that conditioning we just talked about.
We are going to explore exactly why the impulse to complain or to defer to others and to ultimately surrender when things get difficult is actually a learned behavior.
It really is. And to start, we really have to look at someone who entirely rejected that premise. Steve Jobs learned very early in his life that the world was hemmed in by these arbitrary rules and compromises.
Right. And he possessed a much, much more aggressive idea of what was and was not possible.
He fundamentally believed that a high aim could create something genuinely extraordinary.
Yeah, he flatly refused to tolerate people who did not believe in their own abilities to succeed. And he would frequently make demands upon his teams that were, frankly, deeply unfair, highly uncomfortable, or just wildly ambitious. He maintained a malleable, adamant, and completely self-confident view of reality.
Which is wild because for most of us, that level of unshakable confidence does not come easily at all.
Not at all.
Our doubts feel incredibly real to us. They feel tangible and, more importantly, they feel protective.
Yes, protective is the perfect word for it.
But those doubts actually have very little bearing on what is mathematically or physically possible. They are just psychological constructs.
Exactly. And Steve Jobs operated from a place where he refused to let the limitations of others dictate his own boundaries.
He understood that if you accept the conventional wisdom that something is impossible, you guarantee that it remains impossible.
Your actions automatically align with your surrender.
Right. And what is so fascinating about his approach is that he recognized how quickly human beings will default to the safest, lowest effort option when presented with a challenge.
Oh, we do it instantly.
We do. His unfair demands were essentially a mechanism to force people out of that default setting. He was demanding that they abandon their deeply held assumptions about their own limitations.
I mean, imagine being an engineer who has spent months maximizing every single millimeter of space in a device.
Right, you are totally exhausted.
You present it, you say it cannot be made ANY smaller. And he drops it in a fish tank to show air bubbles escaping, demanding you shrink it again.
You look at the sheer intensity of those demands, and you really have to ask if Steve Jobs was simply being a delusional tyrant.
It is a valid question to ask.
Because there is a very fine line between pushing someone to be their best and completely detaching from the reality of a situation.
Absolutely.
Like, if you demand that an engineer break the laws of physics to make a computer smaller or faster, and you berate them when they cannot do it, that looks a lot like delusion. It looks like someone who simply refuses to accept the basic facts of the world around them. It is so easy to look at that behavior and dismiss it as arrogance rather than some profound philosophical strategy.
Well, it looks exactly like arrogance on the surface. But we have to clarify the profound difference between being genuinely delusional and possessing an adamant, self-confident belief in potential.
Right.
Delusion is a detachment from reality that leads to inevitable failure. You ignore gravity, you step off a cliff, and you fall. Yeah, physics always wins.
Exactly. What Jobs was doing was aggressive reality testing. Most objections and the overwhelming desire most people have to play it safe are rooted purely in fear.
Wow. Purely in fear.
They are not rooted in objective reality. They are rooted in a fear of failure, a fear of embarrassment, or just a fear of exhaustion.
So when an engineer says a task is impossible, they're usually saying they are afraid to expend the massive energy required to attempt it from scratch.
Yes. Or they are terrified of the consequences of coming up short. A truly self-confident belief strips away that fear entirely.
Hmm.
It allows a person to look at a genuinely unfair or seemingly impossible task and engage with it objectively. It is the understanding that you can do it, and you simply need to get your mind around the mechanics of the problem.
So it is about bypassing the emotional freakout and getting straight to the mechanics.
Precisely.
And this brings us right to the foundational core lesson here. Our perceptions dictate our reality to an incredibly large degree.
They essentially determine what we are and are not capable of achieving. Yeah. In many ways, they determine reality itself for the individual experiencing it. If you believe in the obstacle more than you believe in the goal, the obstacle inevitably triumphs.
It has to. Because what you focus on and what you grant power to in your own mind will be the thing that ultimately dictates the outcome.
Right. It is like if you are driving a race car and you start to spin out, if you stare at the wall, you are going to steer your car directly into the wall.
You will follow your eyes right into a crash.
Exactly. You have to force your eyes to look at the open track. It actually sounds a bit like judo, right?
Oh, I like that comparison.
Because in judo, you do not meet force with direct force. If a larger, heavier opponent charges at you, you do not try to stop them by standing still and blocking.
No, that would crush you entirely.
It would. You step aside, you grab their uniform, and you let their own aggressive momentum do the work. Their weight and their speed become the precise tools you use to throw them to the ground and defeat them.
You flip their offensive energy into their own downfall.
Ex-
And you use the very thing that makes them dangerous as the instrument of their defeat. That martial arts framework actually maps perfectly onto historical military strategy.
Oh, really?
Yeah, specifically the blitzkrieg tactic used during the Second World War. The blitzkrieg was an entirely new, terrifying form of warfare. It combined incredibly fast-moving armor, concentrated infantry, and overwhelming air support. But the strategy was explicitly designed to exploit the flinch of the enemy.
The flinch. That is such a vivid way to put it.
The entire concept relied on forcing the opposing troops to fundamentally collapse at the mere sight of what appeared to be an unstoppable, overwhelming force.
So it was a mental game as much as a physical one.
Oh, absolutely. The effectiveness of the blitzkrieg was deeply psychological. It worked because the troops being set upon perceived the offensive force as an enormous, impenetrable obstacle bearing down on them.
Right.
Their perception of the event caused them to freeze, to panic, and to break their formations.
They reacted to the package, not the reality of the mechanics. The sheer noise of the dive bombers and the speed of the tanks created a reality of defeat in their minds before the physical battle even fully played out.
Exactly. The weapon itself was devastating, but the psychological terror it induced was the actual mechanism that caused entire armies to shatter and surrender almost immediately.
Wow.
They believed in the obstacle more than their own defensive capabilities.
But the book presents a brilliant tactical flip to that exact historical example.
It really does.
Because when you step back and view that battle from another angle, without the flinch, the Blitzkrieg was actually a suicide mission for the attackers.
Yes.
By rushing forward with such concentrated speed, the offensive force entirely exposes its own flanks. They stretch their supply lines to the absolute breaking point. If the defending army simply refuses to panic, the entire dynamic shifts. By appearing to retreat, letting the offensive force push deeply into their territory, and then collapsing on those exposed flanks to surround them, the defense turns the overwhelming obstacle into a trap.
It is brilliant.
The very speed and aggression of the attack become the reason the attackers are destroyed. They use the enemy's momentum against them exactly like that judo throw.
And that represents the essential mental flip we must achieve. We do not control external reality. We do not control the forces arrayed against us.
Right.
But after we have mastered our own emotions and eliminated the instinct to flinch, we can look at a disaster and see a unique chance to grow. We could look at a seemingly catastrophic situation and use it to experiment with new tactics and add to our skill set.
This is especially true for entrepreneurs, I think.
Oh, 100%.
Yep.
An entrepreneur is fundamentally someone with faith in their ability to make something out of absolutely nothing. When they are given a desperately unfair task, or when their resources are completely stripped away, they do not just survive. They consistently find their most creative, brilliant ideas precisely because they are forced into that desperate, nothing-to-lose state.
Because obstacles illuminate new options that would have remained entirely invisible during comfortable times.
Exactly. The disaster forces a level of lateral thinking that simply cannot be replicated when everything is going well.
Okay, well, let us be real for a second. Most of our listeners are not fighting off armored tank divisions.
Sure.
And they might not be trying to build a massive technology startup in a garage either. We need to demonstrate exactly how you, listening right now, can turn this grand theory into a daily micro-habit.
Mm-hmm.
The blitzkrieg you face is much more mundane. So let us look at a highly specific, universally relatable scenario.
Okay, good.
Imagine dealing with a headache-inducing coworker or a professional rival who constantly undermines you in meetings.
Oh, we have all been there.
Right. The immediate conditioned impulse is to complain to human resources, to vent to your spouse every night at dinner, or to try and avoid this person entirely.
Yeah, we treat them as a pure negative in our life.
We view them as a roadblock to our happiness and our productivity. We expend massive amounts of energy wishing they would just go away.
We do, but we have to completely flip the script on how we look at that stress. The actionable psychological shift here is incredibly potent.
Tell me more about that.
Instead of complaining or deferring, you must actively use that rival to harden you. You must choose to view them as a vital, necessary tool.
A tool.
Yes, that difficult coworker is the person who keeps you alert and prevents you from becoming complacent in your role. They constantly raise the stakes of your daily performance. They motivate you, perhaps out of sheer spite initially, to prove them wrong through undeniable competence.
Spite can be a very powerful motivator.
It really can. Furthermore, they help you to deeply appreciate your true friends and your supportive colleagues by providing a stark contrast.
That is a great point.
Perhaps most importantly, they provide a clear living example of exactly who not to be. You get to study their flaws, their petty behaviors, and their negative impact on the culture. And you can consciously choose to forge your own character in the exact opposite direction.
Oh.
This taps into the deeply established psychological concept of post-traumatic growth.
And post-traumatic growth is not just that old cliche of what does not kill you makes you stronger. It is much more profound than a motivational bumper sticker.
Oh, absolutely.
It is not just about bouncing back to where you started.
No, it is a profound neurological and psychological reality. Psychologically, when a trauma, a massive stressor, or a deeply unfair obstacle shatters your worldview, your brain is forced into a state of hyperneuroplasticity.
Hyperneuroplasticity.
Yes, it has to physically and mentally rebuild your understanding of reality to accommodate this new, difficult information. You are constructing a more complex, resilient psychological architecture.
So the struggle itself builds the new structure.
Exactly. The struggle against an obstacle propels the fighter to an entirely new level of capability. It is crucial to understand that the very extent of your struggle determines the exact T amount of your subsequent growth.
Meaning a minor inconvenience builds a tiny bit of patience.
Yes, and a massive, soul-crushing unfairness, if navigated without surrendering, builds an unbreakable psychological foundation.
There's a line from the author that sums this up perfectly. He writes, "A piercing gaze can ignore the package and see only the gift."
Oh, I love that quote.
I love that imagery of a piercing gaze. It implies effort. It implies a deliberate, intense focus that cuts through the superficial wrapping of a situation. The package might be incredibly ugly. It might be a demotion, a failed project, or a humiliating public mistake. The package is designed to make you flinch and turn away in disgust.
It is.
But that piercing gaze refuses to be distracted by the wrapping paper. It stares intently until it locates the actual value hidden inside.
And we must be absolutely clear that this is not some form of toxic positivity.
Right.
This is not an empty glass half full platitude where you paste a fake smile on your face and pretend that bad things do not hurt. It requires looking entirely through the negative, looking past its underside, and staring directly into its positive corollary.
So it is much more calculating.
Yeah. It is a ruthless, objective calculation. The obstacle undeniably still exists. The pain of the failure is real. The unfairness of the situation is an objective fact. But the benefit is always buried right below the surface, waiting to be extracted by whoever has the discipline to look for it. Behind the behaviors and the events that provoke an immediate, visceral, negative reaction from us, there is always an opportunity.
There is always some exposed benefit we can seize mentally and then act upon.
Always. And it leads to a very pointed question. What kind of idiot decides to just complain and fight the package, entirely wasting their energy on the wrapping paper instead of taking the hidden benefit that the situation is desperately trying to hand them?
That is such a harsh but necessary question, and it brings us to our final takeaway today. I want to remind you that blessings and burdens are never mutually exclusive.
No, they arrive together.
They are two sides of the exact same coin. Every single fear and every agonizing doubt you experience during an injury, a profound loss, or a massive professional setback can be actively turned into greater abilities in those exact areas.
If you refuse to flinch, the vulnerability becomes the armor.
Yes, the very thing that threatened to break you becomes the specific material you use to rebuild yourself stronger.
Mhm.
The second act of your life, or your career, is fundamentally built upon the rubble of the unfortunate events from the first act. Everything can be flipped.
I will leave you with one final provocative thought to mull over long after we finish speaking today.
Okay?
I want you to consider the biggest, most unfair hurdle currently blocking your path right now. Think about the one situation that causes you the most anxiety, the one you complain about the most, and the one that feels entirely out of your control.
We all have one.
We do.
Mm.
Critically ask yourself how your trajectory would change today, right in this very moment, if you treated that exact barrier as your greatest unfair advantage. Imagine how your life alters if you look at that towering wall and decide that it was placed there specifically to force you to learn how to climb.
That is a phenomenal challenge to leave you with. Please remember to like and subscribe to get notified about the next episode.